Tonight, a rise in infections and a fall in interest rates. Australia prepares for a pandemic. Also tonight, slow burn. Australia's medicinal cannabis industry faces a reality check. Bidding farewell to Geelong's historic auction house. And a painful loss to Australia, Elise Perry out of the T20 World Cup. Good evening, Tamara Oudyn with ABC News. Australians are being told to brace for drastic measures to control a coronavirus outbreak. The federal government says it has the power to lock down whole areas of the country and to detain Australians suspected of carrying the virus. It's warning that people might be shocked at what's to come. The number of Australian cases has today jumped to 38. There are 4 new cases in New South Wales, including the first one that appears to have come from Singapore. And a student from China who spent 2 weeks in Dubai so that he could enter Australia has tested positive after arriving in Brisbane. Jane Norman reports from Canberra.
Thriving cities turned into ghost towns. Public transport shut down, patients forcibly quarantined. Extreme measures in the epicentre of the coronavirus outbreak.
They're very important laws.
Not dissimilar to powers available here.
They will be, in some instances, strange and foreign to many Australians.
The Commonwealth's activated laws never used before, allowing authorities to declare special quarantine zones that people would be banned from entering and imposing control orders on those suspected of carrying the virus, forcing them into isolation.
If people were declining to abide by the conditions of a control order, some forms of detention are available.
The unprecedented measures are a last resort to deal with a major coronavirus outbreak. But regardless, Australians are being told to prepare for disruption. Depending on the rate of spread, aged care homes could be locked down, childcare centres and schools closed.
It's very bad because kids can't stay home.
It wouldn't be the end of the world, but I'd probably go a bit crazy.
So far, the numbers in Australia are low and most of the cases contracted the virus overseas.
There is no evidence of sustained or widespread community transmission in this country.
For now, the focus is firmly on travellers returning from coronavirus hotspots like Iran, Italy, South Korea and Japan. They're being told to self-isolate and avoid close contact with other people, including shaking hands.
We're not suggesting that those practices should be considered by the broader general community.
Other practices being discouraged, panic buying.
I can understand the anxiety that's out there in the community.
It's prompted a prime ministerial intervention. Coles and Woolworths have assured him that supplies won't run out, while local production of toilet paper is being ramped up just in case.
And I'm sure that'll come as a great relief to everybody.
The Prime Minister's refusing Labor calls for a major stimulus package to shield the economy from the coronavirus fallout, insisting this is not another global financial crisis. Instead, he's preparing to announce moderate support for industries including education and tourism to keep cash flowing and businesses afloat. Jane Norman, ABC News, Canberra.
A Victorian man who flew into Avalon Airport this morning from Kuala Lumpur is being tested for coronavirus, while other passengers have been sent home. Victorian hospitals are preparing for thousands of potential COVID-19 cases, and the Premier has warned non-urgent healthcare will be postponed when the virus spreads.
If we get to that, what many believe to be an inevitable pandemic phase, so where containment no longer works, we finish up with more and more transmission at a local level, we'll have tens of thousands of people who will need care.
The AFL has also abandoned a planned match between St Kilda and Port Adelaide in Shanghai because of the virus. Interest rates have been cut to a record low of 0.5% as the Reserve Bank seeks to contain the economic impact of the virus. All 4 big banks have passed on the cut in full after the Prime Minister took the unusual move of calling on them to do so before the official cut was announced. Philip Lasker reports.
The empty shelves at this neighbourhood supermarket tell a story of coronavirus fear.
Things are out of stock. from the warehouse level. We are trying to, particularly sanitizers. Sanitizers are too much in demand. Sanitizers, masks, they're out.
It's a small example of what's happening right across the country.
RBA cut 25 basis points as expected.
This broad economic threat has forced the Reserve Bank to cut rates, the first central bank in the developed world to do so since the virus outbreak. In its statement, it pointed out that the coronavirus is having a significant effect on the economy, that the uncertainty is likely to affect spending, that economic growth right now is likely to be noticeably weaker than expected, and that it's difficult to predict how large and long-lasting the effect will be.
Rate cuts are really in part designed to short-circuit that really poor confidence and the downward spiral in risk assets, which can feed through to the real economy.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison took the extraordinary step of virtually flagging a rate cut before it happened, pressuring lenders to pass it on.
I would expect they would do the right thing by those Australians who are looking to see any support that the Reserve Bank would be seeking to provide at this time for these reasons.
All four major lenders obliged, passing on the full 25 basis points, which means a monthly saving of $60 on a $400,000 standard variable loan. But savers will be worse off. The Prime Minister's comments left financial markets with the impression that the Reserve Bank could take even more drastic action. Now there's a lingering sense of disappointment, which the RBA probably didn't want. The RBA said it's prepared to cut rates again, but there was a clear message to the government to do more.
There is a very pointed reference to the government assisting areas most affected by the coronavirus.
It's unlikely the government needs any more convincing. Philip Lasker, ABC News.
The World Health Organization says the number of new coronavirus cases outside China is now almost 9 times higher than inside the country. In Japan, almost 1,000 people have been infected, and that number increases every day. The government there has been criticised over its handling of the outbreak. And with the Tokyo Olympics just months away, a lot is at stake. But as North Asia correspondent Jake Sturmer reports, authorities are adamant the Games will go ahead as planned.
Everywhere you go in Tokyo, there's almost guaranteed to be a crowd. Perfect conditions for the transmission of a highly infectious and deadly virus. Government officials believe that it could be young people with mild symptoms who are causing the most damage, and yet they're not being tested because their symptoms aren't serious enough.
To prevent elderly people from dying, we need to prevent young people getting infected.
In this Tokyo clinic, Dr. Shinichi Nishida is assessing a 70-year-old man who's been coughing for days. He believes the man should have a coronavirus test, but when he calls the public health centre to order one, it's engaged. He's later told that the symptoms weren't severe enough to warrant a test.
It's troubling for the patient, but also problematic for doctors, because even if they have difficulty making a decision, we need to consult someone.
The country can now conduct 4,000 tests per day, and Japan's health ministry says from this week it'll be much easier for doctors to order them.
At the very beginning we had a limitation on the capacity, but it is now increasing.
In order to maintain public confidence, Japan's Prime Minister has asked for sporting events and mass gatherings to be postponed, scaled back or cancelled, schools to shut down for more than a month. Even the Olympic Museum is temporarily closed. But he says the Olympic Games themselves are certainly going ahead, with just 4.5 months to go.
The epidemics in the Republic of Korea, Italy, Iran and Japan are our greatest concern.
And the advice for Australians reconsidering visiting Japan.
But they shouldn't cancel their flights.
Please come.
The next 2 weeks will be crucial and are sure to reveal just how contained the virus is in Japan. Jake Sturmer, ABC News, Tokyo.
To other news now, and the man who raped and killed Melbourne comedian Eurydice Dixon has launched a bid for early freedom. James Todd is currently serving at least 35 years in prison, but today his lawyers argued he doesn't deserve life behind bars because of his good character and genuine remorse. Danny Tran reports.
On the night she died, Eurydice Dixon texted her boyfriend as she walked across Princes Park. James Todd chose this moment to attack, knocking her to the ground before raping, then killing her. For his crimes, Todd was sentenced to life behind bars. 35 of those years will have to be served before he's eligible for parole. His lawyer, Daniel Gurvich QC, has acknowledged the killer's crimes were heinous and prolific, but argued the offences, in particular the murder, did not warrant life imprisonment, and the offences did not warrant a term as long as 35 years. Todd has sexual sadism disorder, and his sentencing judge said there was significant risk he would reoffend. But his lawyers argue it is sheer speculation to say he might offend again. This was a 19-year-old man. It was important in our submission that he not have a sentence that was effectively crushing imposed upon him. Eurydice Dixon's death struck a chord with many Australians, furious that another young woman was murdered on Melbourne's streets. Today, James Todd's age, plea of guilty, autism and good character were listed as strong mitigating factors in his favour. But Victoria's Chief Crown Prosecutor, Brendan Kassane QC, rejected this. The gravity of the offending cannot be understated. Our submission is that the imprisonment is proportionate, and so is the 35 years. James Todd didn't appear in person. He watched his appeal by video link. At one point during the prosecution's arguments, he covered his mouth and yawned. The court will make a decision on the appeal next week. Danny Tran, ABC News, Melbourne.
The IBAC corruption inquiry has heard more explosive allegations about a property developer accused of bribing Casey councillors and residents to push his projects. John Woodman and his lawyer allegedly set up a bogus community group and paid its president more than $5,000 a month. State political reporter Bridget Rollison has the latest.
Ray Walker and his wife Burley were uncomfortable with the attention they received outside the IBAC hearings today.
Don't worry about it, Burley.
Mr Walker was also feeling the heat on the stand, where it was alleged he was paid $60,000 a year by property developer John Woodman to head a community group used to garner support for the developer's projects.
I have to say it was a very uncomfortable situation I was put in.
The Save Cranbourne West Residents Action Group was set up by Mr Woodman's lawyer Megan Schutz to give the impression there was massive community demand for Mr Woodman's projects. Mr Walker told the inquiry he was mostly paid to collect real estate data and said he was struggling financially after his wife was diagnosed with breast cancer and his daughter suffered a serious work accident.
I was being used in that situation.
Basically, you were selling your position. There was no other explanation here, Michael Tovey asked. Yes, Ray Walker said. The state government was again embroiled in the scandal after a secret phone call was played to the inquiry, which heard Ms Schultz boast she'd met with the Premier and several senior ministers, including the Treasurer Tim Pallas, who introduced her to a secretary of his department, which she says helped her get a deal over the line.
And it never would have happened if it wasn't for you. So thank you so much, Tim. And he said, Megan, we work together. We work together to achieve outcomes.
Minister, just for once, tell the truth. On how many occasions have you met with John Woodman or his associates?
Have I met individually with Ms Schultz or Mr Woodman? The answer is no. The answer is no.
The corruption inquiry has more than 3 weeks to run, so it's unlikely to be the last time a government minister is put under pressure. Bridget Rollison, ABC News, Melbourne.
The Prime Minister's been accused of misleading Parliament multiple times over the sports rorts scandal. Labor's made the claim after the Auditor-General revealed last-minute funding decisions were made hours after the election was called and following consultation with Scott Morrison's office. Here's political editor Andrew Probyn.
Early on the 11th of April, Scott Morrison made the traditional journey to Yarralumla. Vice-regal assent obtained to head for the polls.
Prorogue the Parliament from 8:29
With paperwork signed by the Governor-General, major decisions of government were suspended, or so convention dictates, because well after the full-time whistle had been blown on the 45th Parliament, then Sports Minister Bridget McKenzie was still making adjustments to the now infamous spreadsheet that colour-coded sports projects by political party.
Sorting out what the final list of approved projects would look like.
The Audit Office, whose scathing report led to the Minister's resignation, outlining an even more problematic timeline for the Prime Minister.
One project coming out and one project coming in terms of the 8:46am version, that was at the request of the Prime Minister's office.
After another email exchange with the PM's office 4 hours later, further changes.
One project out, 9 in, at 12:43 to Sport Australia.
All 9 late inclusions, projects in government-held seats or electorates being targeted by the coalition.
Colour-coded corruption, and it goes right to the Prime Minister's office.
Manager of Caught red-handed. His office, the Deputy Leader his of the Opposition. decision.
The Prime Minister pummeled by allegations of foul play.
It is very clear that this Prime Minister has misled Parliament
The Leader of the
over
Opposition
and
will
over
resume
again.
his...
The Leader of the Opposition seeks to come to this dispatch box and treat question time as smear time.
When Bridget McKenzie was forced to resign, the government had hoped her ministerial scalp would provide the rest of Cabinet cover. But new revelations about the way the politically compromised program was administered in the short shadow of an election and with the clear knowledge of the Prime Minister's office has only enlivened the scandal. Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
Still to come this hour, can record low interest rates revive a faltering economy?
I'd say things are pretty tough. Cost of living is rising all the time.
Not going to do anything for universities, travel agents, supply chains that are being blocked from China. The interest rate is not really the right sort of instrument for this sort of problem.
Also, the Prime Minister Scott Morrison will join me live from Canberra. That's coming up.
In the US, former Vice President Joe Biden has received a boost in his campaign to become the Democratic presidential nominee, with 2 candidates endorsing him after quitting the race. Ahead of the biggest day of voting, Mr Biden rallied supporters in Texas, emboldened by a win in South Carolina on Saturday.
Just a few days ago, the pundits declared my campaign dead. But then along came South Carolina.
Senator Amy Klobuchar has joined former Mayor Pete Buttigieg in dropping out of the race, with both saying they want to unify moderate voters behind Biden. Senator Bernie Sanders remains his main rival, while in Los Angeles, Senator Elizabeth Warren rallied supporters hoping to stage a comeback. The Super Tuesday polls, when large swathes of the United States vote on the Democratic nominee, get underway tonight. The cost of American health care is a top concern for voters, and one that's being exacerbated by the spread of the coronavirus. Last year, more than 137 million Americans struggled with medical debt, and many had to raid retirement savings or file for bankruptcy. North America correspondent James Glenday reports from the state of Virginia.
In the hills outside Charlottesville, Zan Nelson runs her family's farm. She's very self-sufficient and when diagnosed with cancer, quickly scheduled surgery without seeking a second opinion.
I was containing panic at what was going on in my body.
The operation saved her life, but the $45,000 cost threatened to send her bust. She had no insurance, and in the land of the free, there's only a limited healthcare safety net.
I had no idea, period, what it was going to cost me. I did put my faith completely in this surgeon, and I shouldn't have.
Even some with insurance aren't immune from bill shock. Mother of 4 Amanda Sturgill still in thousands of dollars of debt due to high co-payments from her daughter's back surgery 4 years ago.
I've sold every piece of jewelry that I have. I have nothing. I mean, it was like everything is gone. A lot of times I'll go all day long and I won't eat. I save food and that stuff for the kids.
Lawyers say as many as half their bankruptcy cases are largely due to surprise medical costs.
Health coverage in the United States is not great, right? A lot of employers don't offer health insurance or offer bad health insurance.
And experts warn the high price of care has social consequences. Right now, health authorities are preparing for the coronavirus, hoping to limit its spread throughout the United States. But there are fears that some Americans with mild cases might not seek treatment because of the potential cost. All the Democrats vying to face Donald Trump at November's election have a proposal to improve the system.
In America, you should not go bankrupt because you're struggling with cancer.
But many forecasters warn frontrunner Bernie Sanders' plan to introduce healthcare coverage for all isn't possible without big, unpopular middle-class tax increases.
So you'd have to triple all payroll taxes, or you'd have to double all income taxes, both individual and corporate.
Regardless, Zan Nelson will be voting for a Democrat this year.
It's a human right to be able to be healthy.
She thinks it's about time someone takes on the powerful medical industry and shakes up the status quo. James Glenday, ABC News, Charlottesville.
Many saw it as a pot boom, a new industry to grow marijuana after medicinal cannabis was legalised in Australia. But the fledgling cannabis industry is taking much longer than expected to develop. And some companies are suffering on the stock market, with investors withdrawing their money as confidence in the industry wanes.
In a secret location on the outskirts of Brisbane, Australian company Cannatrek is preparing to harvest its first crop, 4 years after Australia legalised medicinal cannabis. It's taken a lot longer than many backers expected.
The Australian government and the Office of Drug Control really underestimated the size of the Australian cannabis industry, and they've been severely under-resourced.
Another Australian company, Can Group, has listed on the stock exchange, but its results have been poor. Can Group's share price has slumped about 50% in the past 6 months, forcing it to slow down the building of its major growing facility in northwest Victoria.
There's no doubt the bubble bursting analogy is a good one. There was a lot of hype had got into that sector and promised the world. As things settled down, I think some realism has come in.
For many companies yet to be listed on the stock exchange, it's a nervous time.
We saw the medicinal cannabis and, frankly, recreational cannabis markets get kind of confused by speculators and investors. Really, everyone wanted to get on the pot boom.
Others say this was the reality check the industry needed.
There was so much fast money coming into the sector. That was actually really bad because expectations were that we could turn this around fast. And anyone who knows how to make a medicine knows that it takes a long time.
But those committed to the cannabis industry hope milestones like a first harvest will help.
It's very important for the Australian industry, but also for the global industry, that they can get confidence in the cannabis industry.
A promise many investors are counting on. Jess Davis, ABC News.
Now with more on today's rate cut, here's Alan Kohler.
The dollar popped up at 2.30 even though interest rates were cut, because by the time the decision was announced, markets were pricing a 56% chance of a 0.5% cut. So a lot of traders had to quickly adjust their positions when it turned out to be only 0.25%. Tonight the dollar is trading at 65.5 US cents, up on last night, but still a 6% devaluation from January the 1st. Next is expected to be fiscal stimulus, that is cash from the budget. And it's worth knowing that the surplus predicted just 3 months ago has already been lost. No hope of getting there before the government does anything. Meanwhile, a global share market rally last night was sparked by this statement from the chairman of the Federal Reserve in the US, Jerome Powell. The coronavirus poses evolving risks, he said, and the Fed will use its tools and act as appropriate to support the economy. American stocks jumped 4.5%, and one of the biggest rises was retailer Costco because of panic buying of bulk products, and especially toilet paper for some reason. It's global, actually. Toilet paper shelves are empty everywhere. Forget coronavirus, there's a worldwide dunny roll crisis. Our share market rose a more subdued 0.9%, and big gains included BHP, Coles, Telstra and CSL. And by the way, CSL became Australia's largest listed company today, knocking off Commonwealth Bank for the first time, $142 billion versus $140. There were strong gains on commodity markets last night as well. And finally, rest in peace, Australian Associated Press, the newswire business mostly owned by News Corp and Nine Network, but no longer wanted. It's closing at a cost of 180 jobs. And that's finance.
In cricket, Australian batter Beth Mooney believes the team can still win the T20 World Cup without the injured Elise Perry, who's been ruled out of the rest of the tournament. Perry suffered a high-grade hamstring injury in yesterday's win over New Zealand and will also miss this month's tour of South Africa. Australia needs to replace the star all-rounder for Thursday's semi-final against either South Africa or England.
Whilst we don't have an exact replica for Elise Perry, we've got the same character and fight in those plays that we do in Elise. So I have no doubt that whoever it is that steps up and takes her place in the 11 will do an outstanding job for the Australian team.
Wet weather is forecast for Thursday in Sydney, and if Australia's semi-final is washed out, it would miss out on the final due to finishing second in its group. For more than 100 years, Curly's Auction Rooms in Geelong has sold everything from furniture to fur coats and false teeth. But today it held its final sale, and its owners blamed cheap imported furniture and online shopping for the demise of a Geelong institution. Stephen Schubert reports.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Curly's Auctions for the last time for us.
After more than a century operating out of the same building in Geelong, the auctioneers at Curly's have made their final call.
At $5.75 all done, all finished. Sold $5.75 in summer. Probably a little bit sad, but I'm certainly ready for a change after 40 years. The only job I've had, I started here at 16.
Got out of bed every day, come to work, not maybe realising the significance until just now with all the customers' remarks and comments. It's been lovely.
Since 1910, Curly's Auction House has sold everything from the mundane to the weird and the wonderful.
We sold a gravestone once, years and years ago, and the other one is a Victorian, pre-1900s condom-making mould, believe it or not. Yeah.
Curly's has survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression and the GFC, but the world has changed dramatically since it first opened its doors.
To furnish a house now, it's you can do it quite cheaply buying new, imported new goods, or buying online.
Today's crowd is much larger than usual, and nostalgia is playing a big part in that. The owners say since they announced they were selling the business, they've been inundated with people wanting to share their memories of this auction house.
I've been coming here for probably since I've been in Geelong, about 20 years, and furnished about 3 houses out of it, so it's a pretty sad sort of moment, you know.
The lady's been here at 60, any further bidding at 60, or done, sold 60, thanks Lindy.
For the owners, there's nothing like the theatre of a live auction.
Definitely more entertaining, coming live, than bidding on eBay in front of a screen on your own in a darkened room. Who wants that?
A piece of Geelong's history that's going.
No, I had the bid.
Stephen Schubert, ABC News, Geelong.
Time for the weather now. Here's Paul Higgins.
And Tam, we're in for a mostly dry, long weekend, but some rain is on the way before that. Mount Hotham Airport was coldest last night with a low of 1. Out of the mountains, 6 at Nill and Rutherglen. Today, some light showers in the northwest, but the rain mostly stayed up to the north of us under all that cloud there. 28 at Charlton, Shepparton and Wangaratta. In Melbourne, 19.5, the city high at 4.16 this afternoon. That is more than 4 degrees cooler than normal for March. Outside the front door right now, 18 degrees. In fact, it was a cool day right across the nation's southeast while it rained in the outback. 84 millimetres in the last 24 hours. At Tennant Creek, 33 millimetres in the Alice from the leftovers of Cyclone Esther. That moisture will feed into this deepening trough over Victoria tomorrow and on Thursday. Then it clears east of Victoria on Friday. But tomorrow, lots of rain around. Sydney will have up to 20 millimetres of it, and Canberra between 45 and 80. In Brisbane and Adelaide, morning showers. Perth and Hobart, mostly sunny. Well, here's how much rain is possible over the next 4 days. You can see our northeast will get the most of it, but the further west you go, the less will be falling. And this gives you some idea of when that rain will move in during tomorrow, but heavier falls are likely on Thursday. And a shower or 2 tonight over our far north. It'll be humid and cloudy over central and eastern areas. The chance of thunderstorms over the north and near the ranges, and a mostly easterly wind. Now, we have a severe weather warning for heavy rainfall from tomorrow afternoon in this yellow area here, and a brown rot advice for the Northern Country, North Central and North East districts, and for East Gippsland. On the bays, a variable wind at 10 knots in the morning, east to southeasterlies to 15 knots in the afternoon, strong winds on the East Gippsland coast. 15 degrees in Melbourne tonight, and luckily only 22 tomorrow because it's going to get muggy. Cloudy for your Wednesday with a few showers around, mostly in the afternoon and evening, 1 to 6 millimetres of rain and a light southeast wind. Thursday still sticky with more showers and the chance of a thunderstorm, 3 to 10 millimetres, 15 in our eastern suburbs. On Friday, a shower or two up to 2 millimetres, and then a mild long weekend with lower than normal highs. Saturday, a shower or two, a fresh southeast wind, 21. Sunday, partly cloudy, 22, and Labor Day Monday, 21, Tam.
Thank you, Paul. Stay with us. 7:30's next.